Hi everyone, John from JILK here. I wanted to do a video where we talk through some of the kind of influences on our new album, Fix Your Hearts, which is available to order in the link in the description. There was this conceit running through the album of 60s and 70s sort of French pop music, and that had quite a big influence on the way that we mixed the record and the way that we approached some of the songwriting. But then there were like other releases and other albums that kind of had an influence on the sound as well, but also sort of on the narrative and the way that we kind of approached constructing the sort of songs and the tracks. So yeah, just going to talk through a number of albums, and I wanted to start with Moon Safari by Air. I have quite a weird textured journey with this album. It came out when I was in school. I think I was doing my A-levels when it came out. I certainly remember evangelizing to someone in my sixth form block about why Kelly Watch the Stars is such an amazing song. But I wasn't like super into it. I wasn't like a kind of nerdy sort of fanboy about Air. And then I went to uni and we would chuck it on occasionally, but in my mind I sort of just grouped it with that whole kind of like late 90s kind of coffee table sort of scene. And I didn't really sort of pay it too much attention. I think I was quite embarrassed by kind of liking it when it came out. And then like over the years, sort of over the, decades, not to age myself, but over the decades since it's come out, I've revisited it on a regular basis, and it's kind of become one of my favourite albums. And actually I think Air had this amazing run from Premier Symptoms through to Talkie Walkie that's kind of pretty flawless and really fun and really interesting. But anyway, I saw an interview with Air and they were talking to Pitchfork, who do that series where they talk to artists about their sort of 10 out of 10 albums. And the album that Air said was this album by Serge Gainsbourg, Histoire de nelosn. It is a 1971 album, and Air were quite open about how much their sound has been influenced by it, but specifically by Jean-Claude Vernier, who did a lot of the orchestral arrangements on the album, like choir and strings. And so I kind of went and checked it out and I listened to it, and it was this sort of instant classic sort of hit for me. It kind of blew my mind a lot, and it felt a little bit like it inserted itself into my own sort of personal history. Like the nostalgia, the immediate nostalgia that I felt for it was akin to, an album that you heard a lot as a kind of 4-year-old around your house. I love how everything sounds on this album. The drums are delicate and dry. The guitars are sort of fuzzy and bluesy and rich. Serge Gainsbourg's vocals, his like spoken word vocals, are really up front in the mix, really sort of high up. You can hear like the movement of his mouth. And then you just get like hit with these orchestral arrangements, these big dramatic strings, and it's kind of proggy and interesting, and the tracks move in interesting ways. It's only 28 minutes long as an album, so I recommend you listen to all of it, but the first track is 7 minutes long, and it kind of does everything that's cool in this sort of like one epic 7-minute track. The playing is sort of jazzy and loose and kind of sleazy, and in that sense it's this fusion of elements that's really exciting, and on a textural basis, on a sort of timbre kind of basis, it just sounds incredible. And we really thought about chasing that sound, replicating the dryness of the drums, giving everything this kind of analog warmth, but also we let it inform our songwriting as well, not being afraid to sort of move in strange and kind of dynamic ways. It's such a good album. I don't speak French. I can't understand French. I think from what I've read, the lyrics, the lyrical content, what the album is about, I guess would be considered problematic by today's standards, but maybe don't go too far down that route and just listen to how good the music is and how good Jean-Claude Vanier's work is. So from there, we kind of went down a rabbit hole of like 60s and 70s French pop, and eventually landed on this François Hardy album, La Question, which also came out in 1971 and is also amazing. There's no Jean-Claude Vannier on this album, but there is Raymond Donez. I am probably not pronouncing a lot of these names correctly, apologies. He does some of the arrangements, and he played keys for Cerrone. And I think you can hear that disco influence on some of this. And that, again, is quite an interesting fusion because it's essentially acoustic sort of folk arrangements, but occasionally you get these like flourishes of really dramatic strings, and they've got a melancholy to them. And I think it's the same melancholy that you hear in a lot of disco, weirdly. I think it's in these arrangements, and that moves into the rest of the songwriting and the chord progression. And I think that's what I really got sucked into with this album specifically, was this sense of drama, this quite romantic sense of drama. And it's cheesy, it is cheesy. Once you move past that, it's actually just really interesting and fantastic to listen to. And I think we wanted to take that sense of kind of like, I don't know, like fearless sort of romanticism and not being afraid to kind of incorporate a bit of drama, some dramatic strings. It really reminds me of like European cinema. It feels quite cinematic to me. We studied a lot of French New Wave cinema when I was at university, and it really reminds me of that, not just because it's French, but because it's sad and romantic and about kind of love and torture, and yeah. So that was really good. And then from there we were kind of listening to lots of other music from the same period. Loads of albums, like I'm not going to go into all of them now, but I wanted to just give a quick shout out to Days of Future Past by the Moody Blues, which is quite a weird album. It's sort of 1967, and it's, for the most part, kind of classical music. It sounds almost like a soundtrack to like a 60s nature documentary or something like that. It's got one foot in quite traditional sort of classical structures in a way. Lots of sort of fluttering flutes and like dramatic sort of, you know, again, like cinematic, but like really announcing the emotions through sort of melodic choices. And then there's this other element that's just psychedelic folk and rock. And I don't think all of it works, actually. It's not my favourite album at all, but it does culminate in Nights in White Satin, which is a big piece of music in my life from when I was a child. I remember hearing it, definitely from before I was 5 years old, I heard it. And it really stuck with me as a piece of music. It's one of my favourite songs, actually. And again, it's this big, dramatic, string-laden sort of romantic ballad, and there's a flute solo in the middle. And I almost have this quite synesthetic response to it. It sort of feels and it smells and it looks really specific to me. It's all sort of rich gold pyramids and like quite deep blue magenta kind of flowing shapes, and it smells like smoky and there's a claustrophobicness to it, but just is incredible. It really sort of touches me on quite a deep level. I also think it has a through line to a Sigur Rós song from their album, oh Lord, Agitas Byron. The song, it's track 6 on that album. I think it's like Hayato Hamast or something like that. Let me know in the comments if you agree, because to me, Nights in White Satin and that Sigur Rós song have like a DNA connection. They have something that really binds them in my mind. But again, yeah, what we wanted to take from that was this same sense of drama, this same sense of texture, and this same sort of fearless approach to kind of like mixing genre, I guess, and mixing dynamics and taking quite experimental approaches to the way that a piece of music moves when, you know, there are these sort of varied influences, which brings me on to the next album. Just a very quick shout out. DJ Koze, or DJ Koze, I never know. Across all of his albums, I think there is this sort of fearless approach to working with quite disparate elements, quite different styles and influences, but yet making it sound like a cohesive whole. And that's something that we found really inspiring. I think it's something that we kind of strive for in JILK, is taking quite a disparate, varied elements of styles, but presenting it as like a cohesive album or a cohesive piece. But also with DJ Koze, there's this warmth, the way that he uses samples, the way that his kick drum sound, the way that his synth sound, they're all like, I want to use a better word than warm because it's a bit overused in music, isn't it? But they are all warm. It's like getting a gentle hug. And then you've got this like complexity in the way that he's bringing things together, but it doesn't sound sort of challenging. It actually just sounds really lovely and pleasant. And yeah, we wanted to take a little bit of that forward, that kind of adding cohesion to disparate elements through a sort of like almost comforting texture. Yeah, big, massive fan of that, of him. And then finally, Squarepusher. So this is the album Ultra Visitor, but actually it's a specific track from this called Iambic 9 Poetry. And there's a track on a previous EP called Iambic 5 Poetry. And they're just two of my favourite pieces of music ever. Because I think for, you know, relative to Squarepusher's work, they are very organic, very jazz influenced, but very melodic and sort of enriched with this soul and beauty. And again, I think like he's touching on Motown, and he's touching on sort of soul as a genre, and he's touching on funk, and he's mixing these things, but underlying it all again is this melodic sort of melancholy. The drum work obviously is Squarepusher is Tom Jenkinson. The drum work is like next level and incredibly interesting and complicated and challenging, and yet it's held in this sort of vessel of soulful beauty. Like, I think as a musician, I'm often just striving to replicate what those two tracks are doing. So yeah, go and check those out. Thanks for watching. Really quick hyper run through. The album is out on the 7th of November, so it's either available to order or pre-order depending on when you're watching this. And that's not an exhaustive list of our influences for this album, but it was some of the sort of key points in our thinking and the narrative. Yeah, thanks for watching. We'll upload some more videos soon. Be sure to sort of follow over on Blue Sky and Instagram, and go check out the album on Bandcamp. Thanks very much.